So, as many Brexiteers like to crow about, Brexit has, quote, already happened. However, it hasn't really. Brexit properly starts on the 1st of January next year, and that date is fast approaching. And yet we have spent the past 4.5 years arguing about what type of Brexit should be had. Meanwhile, the ultra hard, you know, the Brexit ultras, as they should be dubbed, the ERG, have been forcing upon the government the most hardest form of all Brexit. Despite, when you look at the referendum, it's very clear that there is no mandate for a hard Brexit. In fact, that was never even talked about at the referendum. Boris Johnson himself said that Britain would leave the EU politically but remain in the single market and customs union. You know, to quote Daniel Hannan, only a madman talks about leaving the single market. And yet Daniel Hannan clearly must have gone mad. So someone please send him to an insane asylum. This is the situation that we are in. And now with Cummings gone and this what is going to be a very evident power struggle within number 10, we have to be very, very cautious that essentially there are no adults in the room. And unless an adult takes control, as we said at the beginning of the week, we are destined for an incredibly hard cliff edge. And even if the Prime Minister does decide to get a, quote, skinny deal, that will be just as bad as a no-deal Brexit. And yet that is the barrel that we are looking down. And it's only going to be made more and more obvious as time goes on that we are going to have to deal with Europe. This is just the next step in these relations. And it's going to become very obvious that we have to work with Europe. And that means that we are going to have to acquiesce to their demands because they are the bigger party in this. That is how trade relationships works, even though Brexiteers don't like to admit that. But there you go. And we have more worrying news because now we've got Boris basically saying that he will not move on his red lines, which essentially means Boris Johnson is willing to go and take the entire British economy to the wall for an industry that is worth less than 0.01%. When you compare this to just one company like AstraZeneca, just one small part of the pharmaceutical industry in the UK, which by itself contributes 1% of the GDP. We have said before that just from a business perspective, from AstraZeneca, it makes sense for them just to up sticks and leave. And that will be jobs and 1% of our GDP gone. So anyway, this comes from The Guardian. And it's no deal fears rise as Boris Johnson the least willing to budge on Brexit. Boris Johnson remains the hardest in the room, and it is his unwillingness to budge to secure a Brexit deal, government insiders said this weekend, amid warnings that just days remain to finalise an agreement. After a torrid week of Downing Street, which saw two former vote leavers quit the Prime Minister's serial team, ministers in favour of a deal said that they hoped their departures would boost the chances of finally signing an EU trade deal after months of brinkmanship. However, sources familiar with the government's deliberators said that at repeated meetings it had been the Prime Minister himself who had been the most hardline in wanting to hold out for better terms. They said the departure of Dominic Cummings and the Prime Minister's senior advisor and his advisor, and Lee Kane, his communication chief, would not change the fact that Johnson remained determined and hard to read. So Johnson himself is falling for the classic Brexiteer delusion that the EU is the master of the last-minute deal. That somehow, miraculously, the EU is just going to break on all its red lines, break on all its very clearly pronouncements that it will not undermine the single market just for the UK, and yet here we are. He's falling for that same delusion that all the Brexiteers fall for. So the Prime Minister is always the hardest in the room on Brexit, more so than perhaps other ministers and advisors, said one senior Whitehall source. Another insider said that there was still hope of a deal, But there was a willingness among cabinet ministers to back the Prime Minister should he decide on a no-deal outcome. To be frank, this is one issue where the cabinet is in complete unity, like no other policy, said one person familiar with the deliberations. After the election, the Prime Minister had a lot of political capital on this. It comes ahead of a week in which Johnson maintains a mammoth decision over whether or not to back a Brexit deal that will inevitably require compromises on the British side. Senior figures such as Michael Gove and Cabinet Office Minister overseeing the Brexit preparations, and Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, are said to be advocating a deal. While progress has been made, persistent problems have emerged around fishing rights and the level playing field rules that may prevent Britain from using state aid in the way that it wishes. These are the so-called outstanding issues over the so-called regulation clauses, which would prevent the UK undercutting the EU in some areas. Talks continue on Monday, with a potential deadline set for EU leaders on a video conference on Thursday. However, there are also huge political pressures on Johnson, with some fearing that any sign of Brexit compromise will create yet another opening for Nigel Farage and his new Reform UK party. Farage has said that he has already received over 3,000 expressions of interest from supporters in the prospect of running for the party in the widespread local elections next year. However, the party is currently focusing its campaign on opposing the government's lockdown measures. And the pro-Brexit donors who funded Johnson's leadership campaign are also becoming nervous over the government's direction. It has never been astonishing, actually. I've never seen a government that has been less in touch with any of its fingers and of its extremities, said one donor. It's the end of the fellowship. The fact is, Cummings and Kane are leaving before the end, which tells you they're not going to get the deal that they want, and Boris is now in a hard place, as he wants a deal at any price. Downing Street denies the departures mean that the Brexit deal and a compromise with the EU are now more likely. A donor added, "I would walk away from Brexit talks. There isn't a lot to lose from doing that, given that the deal on offer is essentially only for trading goods in the trading goods sector. It does nothing for our large services sector anyway." Which, again, is going to be a massive problem. That's hilarious. Coming from a Tory donor who said, the entire UK economy, 80% is based on a service-based industry. Most of that business, in fact, the vast majority of it, is done with Europe. And to do that, we have negotiated rights, passporting rights, the main big one, mutual recognition standards, regulatory alignment, audit agreements, so that this is how we do the audits. Okay, great, we agree to that. So you don't have to do the audit a different way. That is unbelievable. But here we are, still staring down the barrel of a no-deal Brexit, and it's really terrifying. It really is. We've said it before, but the country is just literally on a cliff edge, and it's not that the unicyclist, shall we say, that's going along the cliff edge is staying safe. He is willfully tipping himself towards the edge and not really bothering if he goes over, which is going to cause massive damage to this country and its economy. It's going to cause huge damage on a level that we have not seen for years. And I have always maintained this position, always, from the very start of this year. Brexit dies on the 1st of January. It has no policies that we can talk about going beyond about how we can, quote, make this country work. It is predicated on the fact of this magical thinking by the Brexiteers that somehow, once we leave on the 1st of January, magically, everything will just work out for the UK. That is not going to happen. You cannot just magically wish away the EU as much as Brexiteers wish they could. So, as always, thanks for watching. Please do, if you would like to support the channel, head down to my Patreon link down below. And thank you very much to the people that do support me that way. Your support is very much appreciated. And As always, we'll see you next time.